In my WRC8 vs Dirt Rally 2.0 video, I'm going to compare both games to help you decide which one you should buy. That includes looking at the graphics, gameplay, steering wheel and controller support, and a whole lot more. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe. Neither game is at the cutting edge of graphics, it must be said, but then neither has to be. What matters is that you get enough detail to provide realism and maintain a solid frame rate. WRC8 does unfortunately suffer from the odd bit of slowdown, even on the Xbox One X. But it's not much of an issue in single player, as it can actually help you. There's also no 60 frames per second mode for consoles, which means you'll have to play on PC for that luxury. Now, it's a non-issue for those unused to the extra smoothness of 60 frames, but it does seem a shame to not use the extra power of the Xbox One X and PS4 Pro. Dirt Rally 2.0, on the other hand, can manage 60 frames per second on consoles, and in my experience, does so rather solidly. But there are some weird graphical issues on the Xbox. However, even on a fancy computer with a top-end graphics card, Dirt Rally 2.0 just doesn't look as visually appealing, although I will say both games do a great job of extreme weather conditions. On a standard Xbox One, WRC8 looks really quite alive. Not only is it more visually interesting, there is greater levels of realism to be seen, the background's more alive, and people look, well, more like people. Dirt Rally 2.0 just seems flatter and more game-like in comparison. But then there are times when WRC8 overdoes it with the darkening of your view when in direct sunlight, which is realistic to a point, but it's kind of too much sometimes, and therefore plain annoying. Mixed bag here. Depending on the car, I find WRC8's engine noises to be great. The Lancia Stratos, for example, sounds particularly epic when in the view next to the pop-up headlights. But for some reason, some cars are just a little bit electric sounding. I'd say Dirt Rally 2.0 is arguably more consistent here, although people did still complain about engine sounds when the game came out.
In the middle of a big jump, 15. West and 6 left of a jump.
What I will say is that the environment has more of an impact on car sounds in WRC8. Lumps and bumps just appear to do nothing in Dirt Rally 2.0 unless you take off the ground, in which case the wheels spin freely and the car revs very highly. In WRC8, the engine has more character, and I'd say there's more detail and a wider soundstage if you use decent headphones or surround sound.
And caution, hairpin left, 30.
In WRC8, the engines just have more character, and I'd say there's more detail and a wider soundstage if you're using decent headphones or surround sound. Having been in actual rally cars in real life, I can say that both games do a good enough job of immersing you in the experience.
4 right, into 3 left, into 2 right tightens. 30.
The crew management element, choosing events to partake in, bonus challenges, and research tree, which deals with serious rally upgrades, but also things that make progress easier, such as more money from a win, all make WRC8's career mode less susceptible to repetition than Dirt Rally 2.0's. In Dirt, I never really felt compelled to play the career mode for any great time, whereas I'm planning on seeing WRC8 all the way through to the end. Even the lowly, slower entry-level rally series really keeps you hooked. It's worth noting that both have the usual mid-rally repair sessions where you can adjust your car and prioritise repairing certain parts. So neither is actually any more or less true to rally racing in that sense. WRC8 was built with steering wheels in mind according to its developer. This means support for most steering wheels, although not all, and it also means you have a view in the game that allows you to be a little bit closer to the windscreen, and therefore you don't have to look at the digital steering wheel and your own one, which just would look a bit weird. Dirt Rally 2.0 was also developed to accommodate steering wheels and has the same view that's slightly more forward. However, the initial lack of force feedback just made it much less enjoyable to drive using a steering wheel. Things have improved now thanks to updates, but I'm still not sure it's as good as the original Dirt Rally. Now, I will say both games lose points in this area because it annoys me that developers fail to suggest recommended settings to mimic the real-life experience. Given that real rally drivers were used to test Dirt Rally 2.0, people want realism after all, why not give them the best figures for that? In terms of using a controller, which is what most people are going to use because steering wheels are quite expensive, Dirt Rally 2.0 is playable. But I found myself spinning a lot. It's just more frustrating to the point where I struggle to enjoy it. Some cars are actually borderline undrivable without a serious amount of practice, others are just too unpredictable to be fun. WRC 8 is a very different story. It's much more intuitive and instantly inspires confidence. However, it's still not easy, as you can definitely leave it too late to countersteer, for example, and pay the price. Plus the roads are hellishly thin in places, which requires great levels of accuracy, and that increases the intensity. Hell, try driving the Lancia Stratos fast on gravel to see what a twitchy car feels like. Truth is, I found myself sticking with a controller when playing WRC 8 because of laziness, and yet I still enjoy the game hugely. Dirt Rally 2.0, it's a different story. With WRC 8's beefier career mode, I'd say it's going to keep you busier for longer, but then VR users will want virtual reality, and that's a problem. It also depends which you prefer when it comes to handling, as both are really quite different. I'll talk more about that in a second. However, I would say both have similar levels of content such as multiplayer, time trials and rally competitions. Both also have various time challenges that happen weekly or monthly. Dirt Rally 2.0 is, however, better for classic rally machinery such as the Group B monsters, and there are more cars in general if you have the DLC pack, if being the operative word. With that said, WRC has its fair share, such as the original Alpine A110 and Lancia Delta HF Integrale, and of course more could be added later. Given that WRC 8 and Dirt Rally 2.0 both aim to provide a realistic rally experience, it's interesting to see how different the two games actually are. WRC 8 feels considerably more intuitive, and there's greater feedback from the wheels even when using a controller. Surfaces feel more varied as well. It is, however, a bit less punishing in terms of braking, and you can react a little bit later even with all the assists turned off. But it is still easy to fishtail when playing on the controller in some of the faster twitchy machines, so a delicate touch is still needed. Dirt Rally 2.0 on the other hand punishes you for just steering a little too harshly, or for braking too late, or for looking at the steering wheel wrong. Okay, maybe not the last one, but it is hard as nails, which would be fine if you could read the road better. But then we go back to the lack of feedback, so a lot of the time it feels like guesswork. Road rallies, for instance, just feel weird in Dirt Rally 2.0. It just doesn't feel like you're on tarmac. As for the experience itself, WRC 8 has the official license. You can expect all the 2019 cars, all the teams, and as things stand, 102 stages. However, the co-driver sounds like John Cleese, which is great if you love faulty towers, but also slightly jarring when you're driving a car fast. But then that does mean he is at least clear. I'd argue Dirt Rally 2.0's co-driver is a little easier to follow. On the subject of course variety, I'd say WRC 8 wins here, and actually a lot of the stages just flow better, in part thanks to that higher feeling of speed. In Dirt Rally 2.0, for instance, Argentina can just be a chore with the constant switchbacks. But then that's not entirely its fault, as these are stages modelled on actual courses. It helps that in WRC 8 you have dynamic weather, which means the tyres you pick for the first stage or second stage can then become much less effective for the third one, and that's quite exciting and puts more weight on the importance of the meteorologist. I think the issue with Dirt Rally 2.0 is that it just seems to throw a lot of very similar stages at you very early on, and therefore it gets repetitive more quickly. However, if you're used to WRC 7, you could probably say a similar thing about its successor. Going back to VR, the developer of WRC 8 has said that it's not going to bother. Now, it may change its mind, but what that means is at the moment Dirt Rally 2.0 has the edge. However, you will need a PC, as it's not something supported by consoles. So, WRC 8 versus Dirt Rally 2.0, which should I buy? Well, I'd say it's a close call, as it depends on what you want. Neither game is easy, especially if you intend on using a steering wheel, but they are different enough and have their individual merits. For sheer fun and the handling model though, I have to give it WRC 8. The sensation of speed makes it more intense, and the consistency and realism of the physics, not just on tarmac, make it genuinely enthralling. Not only that, the career mode is far meatier, and I find myself just much more hooked on it than in Dirt Rally 2.0. However, Codemasters game claws back points for its historic rally car collection and the steeper, more intense learning curve if you have the patience. Put it like this, it's great to have two compelling rally games on the market, so if you have the money, it wouldn't be the worst thing to buy both. Share the love and all that. But if I had to choose, I would take WRC 8. What do you think?
Square left, 30. Kicks into right 5, brake, tightens 2, short. Into left 2, open.
High five, Titans.